It was one of those blistering Saturday mornings when the air feels thick enough to swim through. I'd thrown on nothing but a pair of shorts and a sando, those loose sleeveless undershirts that make the summer heat almost bearable, and headed outside to water my hydrangeas. The sprinkler system had been acting up again, so I was doing things the old-fashioned way, hose in hand, making sure my plants got their well-deserved drink. The sun was merciless, beating down on my shoulders while sweat trickled down my spine. Still, it was my kind of peace, quiet, slow, and mine alone. That is, until a voice I'd hoped never to hear again shattered the calm. "Excuse me? Excuse me! What do you think you're doing?" That sharp, unmistakable tone could only belong to one person, Karen Wilcox, our self-appointed queen of the neighborhood and president of the Homeowners Association. She came marching across my lawn, clutching a folder like it was a badge of authority, or maybe a weapon. "This is completely inappropriate," she barked. "Cover yourself up immediately!" For a moment, I just stood there, garden hose dangling at my side, trying to process the fact that this woman had actually trespassed onto my property just to scold me about my outfit. "I'm on my own lawn, Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm but making sure to emphasize her name. "Please get off my property." "I will not!" she snapped. "As HOA president, I have every right to enforce community standards, and you are in violation." Her face was turning redder by the second, her folder trembling in her hands like a gavel about to fall. Little did either of us know, what happened next would shift the entire power dynamic of our neighborhood. Within 20 minutes, it wasn't me being lectured, it was Karen, being escorted off my lawn in handcuffs by two weary-looking police officers who clearly had dealt with her kind before. But to understand how it came to that, you need to know a little more about Oakwood Estates, and about Karen. I'd moved into the neighborhood 3 years earlier. It was peaceful, tidy, and close to work. The HOA fees were fair, and the board back then actually seemed to care about the community. They organized pool days, barbecues, and the annual block party. It was a nice, easygoing place. Then, about 6 months ago, everything changed. Karen Wilcox ran for HOA president on a platform to restore community standards. She plastered flyers everywhere, hosted meetings, and practically bullied her way into votes. The day she won, the neighborhood's atmosphere shifted overnight. She treated her position not as a civic duty, but as a throne. First, she went after the small stuff, sending violation notices for lawns half an inch too tall, or for leaving trash cans out 12 hours past collection. Then she started taking aesthetic walks, clipboard in hand, jotting down imaginary infractions that didn't even exist in the bylaws. It was only a matter of time before I landed squarely in her crosshairs. My crime? Declining to join her so-called Neighborhood Beautification Committee, which was really just an excuse to gossip with her supporters and make lists of neighbors she didn't like. After that, I caught her staring from her porch across the street almost daily. Whenever I'd come out in my shorts and sando to tend my plants, her eyes would narrow like she was witnessing some great offense. The irony? Her husband often mowed their lawn shirtless. But apparently, my sleeveless undershirt was where she drew the line for decency. For weeks, I ignored her passive-aggressive comments. "Some of us prefer to dress appropriately in public," she'd mutter when I passed by. Or, "It's a shame when people don't respect the neighborhood's image." I brushed it off, because responding to her nonsense would only make things worse. But eventually, Karen decided she wasn't satisfied with whispers. That fateful Saturday, I saw her coming, marching across the street with that dreaded folder in hand, like she was serving an arrest warrant. She didn't even hesitate at the edge of my yard. She came straight up to me, invading my space with that smug, righteous confidence she wore like perfume. "Your attire," she hissed, practically spitting the word, "is bringing down property values and setting a terrible example for the children in this neighborhood." Her glare dropped to my sando like it was something obscene. "The HOA has standards, Jacob, and you will comply." I took a breath, determined not to lose my temper. "Karen, I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing in the bylaws about what homeowners can wear on their own property. I've read them thoroughly." That's when she whipped out her phone and started filming me. I'm documenting this violation, she declared, like a detective at a crime scene. This footage will be presented at the next board meeting when we vote on the new dress code amendment I've proposed. Karen, I said, stepping back and keeping my tone level, you're trespassing on my property and filming me without my consent. I'm asking you to leave, now. But she just smirked and stepped even closer to my porch. I have every right to be here as HOA president. I'm conducting official business. Then she flipped open her folder and jabbed a finger at a highlighted paragraph. Section 4, paragraph 2. It allows board members access to properties for inspection purposes. Unfortunately for her, she didn't realize she'd picked a fight with someone who actually knew what he was talking about. I work as a paralegal, and I've read more property law than she's likely ever seen. That section refers to common areas, I corrected her calmly, and only during scheduled inspections with prior written notice. It doesn't give you the right to walk onto private property whenever you want. I lowered my voice, looked her square in the eye, and said, Now, I'm asking you one more time to leave. Her lips curled into a challenge. Oh, yeah? She sneered. Or what? She smirked, crossing her arms like she was about to deliver her final blow. Oh, really? Are you going to call the police on me? She sneered. Do you even know who my husband is? He's personally friends with the police chief. That was it, the turning point. Without missing a beat, I pulled my phone from my pocket and said, calm as ever. Yes, actually. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Her confident expression faltered as I began recording her and dialed 911. Karen's eyes widened, a flash of disbelief crossing her face. She looked genuinely stunned, as though no one in her entire reign as HOA president had ever dared to challenge her authority. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. But I held her gaze, phone pressed to my ear. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice came through. Yes, I said clearly. I have someone trespassing on my property who refuses to leave despite multiple requests. Karen's face cycled through an entire palette of colors. Red, pink, and finally a deep shade of purple. Go ahead. Call them, she shouted loud enough for the dispatcher to hear. Tell them I'm the HOA president enforcing community standards against an indecent homeowner. Sir, do you feel threatened? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I replied, never taking my eyes off Karen. She's being aggressive and refuses to leave my property. Understood. The dispatcher said calmly. Officers are on their way. Please try to disengage until they arrive. I nodded, still holding the hose in one hand and my phone in the other. Karen, meanwhile, looked triumphant, like she truly believed the police would take her side. She stayed planted firmly on my lawn, ranting about neighborhood decency and property values, her phone waving wildly as she filmed me from every angle. 10 minutes later, the sound of tires crunching on asphalt made her straighten up. A patrol car pulled to a stop in front of my house, and 2 officers, one male, one female, stepped out. Instantly, Karen's tone flipped like a switch. The shrillness disappeared, replaced by a sugary smile that didn't reach her eyes. Officers, she called out as if greeting old friends. I'm so glad you're here. The female officer spoke first. Ma'am, sir, what seems to be the problem? Before I could get a single word in, Karen pounced on the opportunity. Officer, I'm Karen Wilcox, president of the Oakwood Estates HOA, she said proudly. I'm conducting official HOA business with this resident who is violating our community standards by wearing inappropriate attire in plain view of the neighborhood. She gestured toward my sando as though I were committing a public indecency offense. I took a steady breath. Officers, I asked Ms. Wilcox to leave my property several times. She refused and became confrontational. I have the entire interaction on video. I handed them my phone. They watched for a few seconds, their faces saying it all. Then the male officer turned toward Karen. Ma'am, regardless of your position with the HOA, you do not have the right to remain on private property after being asked to leave. That's considered trespassing. Karen's mouth fell open. But I'm the HOA president. I have authority. The HOA does not override state law, the female officer interjected firmly. And HOA bylaws don't override private property rights. So I'm going to ask you to leave now. That should have been the end of it. but Karen didn't know when to stop. "I will not leave," she barked, waving her folder of rules like a sword. "Not until he agrees to comply with community standards. This is a direct violation of Section 12, paragraph—" "Ma'am," the male officer interrupted sharply. "This is your final warning. Leave the property now, or we'll have to place you under arrest for trespassing." Karen blinked at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. I'm trying to protect property values." "Do you even know who my husband is?" The officers exchanged a knowing look. That universal, "we've got a live one" expression cops wear when they're about to deal with someone truly entitled. The female officer sighed and said, "Ma'am, please set your phone down and place your hands behind your back." Karen's jaw dropped. "What? No. This is outrageous. I'm the victim here," she shrieked, stumbling back as the officers stepped forward. What followed was both tragic and oddly satisfying. Karen tried to resist, still clutching that precious folder of HOA regulations like it was a holy text. The officers, calm and professional, gently restrained her and began reading her Miranda rights. By that time, several neighbors had come outside, drawn by the commotion. Phones were out. A few people even smiled behind their cameras. Karen's voice echoed down the street. "This is a mistake. I'm the HOA president. You can't do this to me. He's the one breaking the rules. Look at what he's wearing." But her protests went ignored as they guided her toward the patrol car. Once she was secured in the back seat, still fuming, the male officer turned to me. "Sir, sorry for the disturbance. You may need to come down to the station later to give a statement." "Of course," I replied, still trying to wrap my head around what I'd just witnessed. "Thank you, officers. I really appreciate it." As they drove off, Karen still ranting behind the glass, I stood there in my sando and shorts, hose dangling, surrounded by neighbors who had just watched the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA lose her crown. 3 days later, I got a call from the police department. Karen had been formally charged with criminal trespassing, harassment, and disorderly conduct. She was facing a $2,000 fine and potential community service. That wasn't all. The HOA board had held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her as president pending her case. And the cherry on top? Karen was a real estate agent. Her arrest made the local paper, complete with a photo of her being escorted into the police car, still clutching that same folder. Her brokerage firm placed her on immediate administrative leave. When I saw her again at the courthouse for her preliminary hearing, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. She leaned in and hissed, "You ruined my life over a stupid shirt." The judge, unimpressed with her outburst, raised her bail by $500 on the spot. As I walked out of the courtroom, I couldn't help but think. Some people learn the hard way that power doesn't make them untouchable, especially not when the law and the entire neighborhood are watching.